Hello, I'm here to introduce both of our guests today, Beth Pandolpho and Katie Cubano. Beth is an instructional coach, writer, and consultant who has taught English at the high school and college level for over 20 years. She is passionate about engaging in work that promotes equity and access for both teachers and students. She is the author of I'm Listening: How Teacher-Student Relationships Improve Reading, Writing, Speaking, and Listening, and Choose Your Own Masterclass: Urgent Ideas to Invigorate Your Professional Learning. Katie is also an educator who is focused on supporting teachers and schools as they design and implement curriculum and instruction that effectively and equitably meet students' needs. Katie has over 15 years of experience in education, including teaching at the secondary and post-secondary levels and working alongside colleagues to improve teaching and learning as an instructional coach. In her work, Katie strives to ensure that each student has full access to their civil rights and in education, and that each teacher is equipped with the skills, knowledge, and dispositions necessary to lead in their classrooms and communities. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's get to it.
I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-creating curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go. Beth and Katie, welcome to the Time for Teachership podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you. I mean, I have told you this before we hit record, but I absolutely love this book. Every teacher and leader in school needs it. I'm thrilled to be having a conversation with you about it. I am curious to know, there are so many things in the world that we all encompass. There are so many things that we could talk about in this book. What is important for listeners to know, either about you or just that you want them to have in mind as we jump into our conversation today?
Okay. So, hi, I'm Katie Cubano, and I've been in education for over 15 years now. I taught English in the secondary grades for over a decade before becoming an instructional coach. Worked on the same team as Beth until last June, when I resigned to be home with my 1-year-old. So my now 1-year-old. So I'm working in the paid workforce right now in a part-time role. So I'm doing student teacher supervision for the College of New Jersey and taking care of my little one. And Beth and I also published Choose Your Own Masterclass in 2023.
Hi, I'm Beth Pandolpho, and I've taught English for over 20 years at the high school and college level. I'm presently an instructional coach for grades 6 through 12. And I think one thing at this point in my career that's important to me is just working toward equity and access for teachers and students.
I love that. I think that is a shared belief and goal for all of us. And I think that's actually a really good segue into the big first question that I usually ask people. So this idea of freedom dreaming comes up on every episode of this podcast. And Dr. Bettina Love describes it as dreams grounded in the critique of injustice. Considering that, what is the big dream that you hold for education?
So I think that we'd love to talk about this in two parts. The first part being our dream for students, and then the other piece being our dream for teachers. So I think, our dream for students is to make sure that every student has full access to their right, to their civil right to an education, which enables them to not only succeed academically and follow their passions, but also to grow into citizens who are able to create a more just and humane world, to sort of, and this is my Freire roots speaking, to humanize and be humanized in turn by their relationship to learning and into community.
And just to continue that, I think a lot about students having the ability to become who and what they want to be, and education as the engine of social mobility. And then our dream for teachers. Katie, do you want to start on our dream for teachers?
Sure. So we feel so passionate about the work we do, about the students we love, and about the colleagues who we love and we work alongside. And we want to make sure that teachers work under conditions which enable them with the intellectual freedom, material resources, and professional learning opportunities that help them to do the job that they love and benefit of all of our students.
And I think part of, why we wrote the book is that we feel really strongly about teachers being treated like the educated and creative professionals that they are.
Oh my gosh, I love both of these streams. Excellent. Thank you. That was really also very succinct. I'm very impressed by you all. So as you think about kind of the path to the dream, I'm curious to know, being instructional coaches, being in that space, thinking about working together on the book. I'm just envisioning this path. What feels like, the blocks along the path? Where along the path do you see yourself having accomplished great things? And then kind of like what's next? I usually think about some buckets like, there's a lot of mindset work. There's a lot of, like, you guys call them, I think, like introspective reflection sections of your book, right? There's the pedagogy pieces and instructional pieces. Like, what does this look like with students? There's like the assessment, the content, right? There's all sorts of different things that I think good quality teaching and the structures that enable these teachers to thrive in the ways you described. There's just so much. So where do you see kind of yourselves along this path?
Yeah, and I think for Katie and I, we both were thinking about students and teachers, because a lot of times we work toward equity for students, and then we're seeing things happen like systemically that feel really not fair. So in terms of students, I feel like right now in my career, my focus is listening to and working to serve our most underrepresented and vulnerable student populations and creating opportunities where there weren't any before. And then in terms of my work with teachers, I'm very interested in how we can provide scaffolds and supports in the classroom, because often what works for our most vulnerable students works for everyone.
Yeah, I love that, Beth. That's so true. And shockingly, I agree with you completely. I think that when I think about the path to the dream for me and sort of where I've been and where I'm going next, a lot of it is rooted in the pedagogy piece. So thinking about my path to that dream, I hold for students full access to their right to public education. It's really been rooted in my approach to the teaching of ELA, both in pedagogy and thinking about content. Working with a lot of students whose needs have not been fully met by both education and society at large, and who as a result, they're working to improve their skills. And I'm sure that, you have plenty of other guests and plenty of other listeners who have talked about the problem with thinking just about remediation as our lens, right? So really, I've focused my energies both as an educator and an instructional coach. And I think also in the way that Beth and I think about and talk about teaching and learning and students and teachers in the book, really focusing on providing students with engaging and relevant curriculum and instruction that meets them where they are and helps them be lifelong readers and writers, not just people who are assigned reading and writing. I think so often in the ELA classroom, we're like teaching as though this is like a college English course, and our students have chosen to major in, English literature or something, when what we really need to be doing is focusing on what they need to grow into people who have reading and writing at the core of their identity as they move forward, or at least as like a part of their identity that they can appreciate and see as something that matters to them in real ways. So for me, this has always included like a very robust independent reading program with all of the attendant efforts that go into making that happen. And so as an educator in my own classroom, as an instructional coach, supporting my colleagues to do that kind of work and advocating for the funding necessary to get the texts they need, to help them find great texts, to listen to what texts they want and try and get other people to pay for that. Beth and I did a lot of work like that with our other teammate as well. And then in the book, Beth and I also talk about the importance of robust independent reading program. When we think about our values for our students, we have a chapter on lining up. It's on decreasing decision fatigue. And we talk about lining up our values with our practices and how so often they can get trampled when we're not very intentional. Those values, we can just get swept up. So robust independent reading, strong writing workshop approach that really honors the fact that even our high school learners need writing instruction, maybe even more so than our younger or at least as much as our younger learners do. And then I think the other piece, both as an educator and an instructional coach, really thinking about comprehensive article and vocabulary study, which maybe seems small and unimportant, but was really important in my classroom and foundational to helping students build background knowledge about how systems and levers of power work, and helping them become sort of aware and justice-minded citizens who can use that knowledge to advocate for change. A lot of times that knowledge is withheld intentionally or unintentionally. We could get into a whole discussion about that, but they've missed it and they need it. So a lot of that work too. So that's sort of the content and pedagogy piece. And then in terms of our dreaming for teachers, both of us, we're interested in really supporting them to explore the issues we talk about in the book, which, urgent is in the subtitle. It's a nice long subtitle, which I'm very happy about, as Beth knows. So it's Choose Your Own Masterclass, Urgent Ideas to Invigorate Your Professional Learning. And we want to support teachers to explore these issues so that they can draw inspiration directly from the thought leaders that we've explored, who are all from outside of the field of education, and use those insights to reflect on ways that they can immediately and creatively respond to their needs, the needs of their students, in both curriculum and instruction, also in climate and culture, in their classrooms and schools, because we feel really strongly that teachers really deserve a responsive and choice-based professional development, professional learning experiences. That's what they give their students. Beth is always saying so beautifully, and that's what we want in our work and throughout, through the book, to give back to them.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that, Katie. That is something that I say a lot. Like, why don't we give teachers what they give their students? Like, why are we not giving teachers what they give their students? And there's a Starbucks quote, and it's like, the one who sweeps the floor should choose the broom. And I mean, not that teachers want to be, analogous to like, that teaching is like using a broom. But also, why are they being told what to do? Exactly what to do? Why are they not just being given the stimulus of what to think about and then figure it out in response to their students? So I feel like those are mantras that Katie and I are always thinking about. And, so for us, like, writing this book was really an act of love for our colleagues and our teachers. Like, we wanted this to be like a gift. If we could do anything, to make professional development better, we felt like this was what we'd want our colleagues to have. And for the administrators, when we got the peek behind the curtain, we thought, wow, these people need some support. So it was with both of those things in mind.
Amazing. And I'm sure in some of these questions, we will talk about the format of the book itself and kind of that idea. I feel like that for me was a huge mindset shift that I have seen in leaders as they are thinking about designing PD for teachers and what that could possibly look like. I think your book is a beautiful answer to that. I'm curious to know if that's a mindset shift that you want to unpack here, or if you have other mindset shifts that you were thoughtful about in terms of like, what is it that teachers, leaders, like, what mindset journeys do they really need to go on, or how should they shift to be able to get to that place where we can achieve the dream that you described?
Yeah, I do think we wanted to talk about it in terms of the book. When we were thinking about our mind shift, I said, Katie, what's our mind shift? And she's like, our mind shift is the book. That's our book. So I said, you're right. Because we think in order to achieve more equitable outcomes for teachers, and students, you have to also focus on the teachers. So for teachers, this is it's a book of 6 chapters. They're standalone. They're like long research articles. So you can begin with chapter 4. And if you only read chapter 4, you have a full experience. If your colleague reads chapter 2, there are jigsaw questions to have cross-curricular conversations. All of the thought leaders are from outside of education because, we've decided that social and emotional learning is really important, but also like psychology knew this was important for decades. So it seems like we just wanted to say teachers are really busy. Here's some urgent ideas from outside the field of education. You don't need to wait 20 years to find them out. Like, here they are. And then it's not what Beth and Katie think about them. Like, what do you think about them? These are people that are doing the work, in other fields. So the way we identified the topics for the chapters is we made a gigantic chart, But then we also just took people from our school and said, like, okay, here's our PE teacher, here's our very resistant whatever teacher. And we were like, we need to, if we want to make equitable professional development, we need to think about all of these people. And so there were things, it could have looked very different if it was the Beth and Katie book, because we would have just done what we liked. But
Would
we
have been a lot
didn't.
of fun.
What? Which would have
That
been
would have been a
fun.
lot of fun. No,
But only we would have, only our family.
for us.
Yeah, that would be for us. So yeah, so we had to challenge ourselves, because there were times like there were teachers that would not want to read the Beth and Katie book. So the things that we decided were urgent in education. The first one is emotional intelligence. And people talk a lot about, that's not what we're here to do in school. And, oh, kids are so much more sensitive, than they were previously. So like, we don't want to feed into that. But really, emotional intelligence and academics, like, they're intertwined. You can't do one without the other. So chapter 1 is on emotional intelligence. Katie?
And I just want to add to that, one of the things Mark Brackett talks about, who we bring into that first chapter, he talks about, sure, kids today are more sensitive, and that's great. Sensitivity is a superpower that can be harnessed, to make everything in a person's life better, to help them become so much more self-aware, to help them understand their reactions to, uh, conversations, both in the home, out, in school, as educators, right? Too. So we're talking about both student self-awareness and teacher self-awareness in that piece. But we love what Mark Brackett, how he frames that. Like, yes, they are more sensitive, and that is okay. And that is something that we can use to help them move forward, not something that holds them back.
And you can't separate your emotions from academics. Like, if you come in and you had something happened at home or something happened with a friend, that is going to impact you. We can't separate it. If you feel nervous or unsafe and there's an exam, you're not going to do as well. I mean, these are not things we could just say, this does not belong in school. Like, we bring our whole humanity to every space. So Katie, if you want to talk about chapter 2 and balancing technology?
Oh, I do.
I know you do.
So major mind shift here. This chapter is called Balancing Technology Use in the Classroom. And, we were seeing a lot, and we still are seeing a lot. We're very happy to see this conversation about the importance of schools helping students not be so attached to their phones, right? So what can schools do? Some schools are banning them entirely. They're putting them in lockers. I actually advocate for that approach, but there's lots of approaches, all along the continuum. And what we weren't seeing, though, was a reckoning with the degree to which we're tethering students to their devices in the classroom and when they go home for the day. And we felt like there needs to be a major mind shift here, because, it is our responsibility to help students receive an education which respects, their need for healthy lives and a healthy balance, including time away from their screens, and not only in the classroom again, but at home, time for play and nature, time for family, and time for community. And we are not striking this balance right now with the degree to which we ask students to access their education on the computer. When we think about the original goal that we talked about, of students having a full access to their civil right to an education, we got these one-to-one devices. We moved forward with so much enthusiasm, and now we need to pause and say, is the current state of affairs providing students with a full access to their civil right to an education? And we would argue that it's tipping into such an unhealthy territory with the amount that we're having them on the screens. The great news is we're very well positioned to help stem this tide of tech overuse, and help our students understand the problems with surveillance capitalism, big tech's role in both their education and their lives outside of school. And we have some really practical strategies and exercises that educators can use to start to think about how if their pattern tipped into sort of digitizing as the default, which many of us went that way, especially with the pandemic. That's totally understandable. How we can start to walk that back. So just one quick example, and all of these are free, free printable reproducibles if people want to check them out and adapt them in ways that work for them, but on our website for the book. But one quick example would be just simply auditing your tech tool usage. So thinking about, how many are you using, and what is the defense for the use of each? And is there any duplication happening? Are you using, I'm not going to be able to think of the name of it now. I know Pear Deck, but what's the other one that my friend was just, The one that's just like Pear Deck. Anybody? Has such a silly name too. I'm not gonna be able
Oh, I know which one you mean. But yeah, but so I mean, where Katie's going with this is people say like, oh, I heard about this tool. And it's like, right, it's exactly Pear Deck. And we have a premium subscription to Pear Deck. So so I mean, also in there with the best intentions, teachers want to do like the newest, the best, the most engaging, interesting. And it's just like, right, it's Pear Deck. It's the same exact thing. So
Yeah.
save your energy and your goodwill. And so, we're really just to be like, link it to your instructional outcome. And if you already have something that fits that bill, then that's sufficient.
And maybe what you have that fits that bill is not using the screen. Maybe it's doing it in paper. And that was working great. Beth shared this really great example the other day. She was saying great example, digitized for the pandemic. I'm going to let students choose from these 4 articles. And I always do this. I have these 4 articles curated. I love them. Oh, I found a new one in the Times this week, and I'm going to add that. So now I've got 5 beautiful articles. I'm going to put them all up on Google Classroom, right? The students, even to get to that post sometimes, the exercise in willpower and attention resources just to get to that post on Google Classroom.
And then 5 to choose from, 5. Right. And then some open them all up. So now they have 6 tabs open in addition to whatever else they had open. And how do you pick these articles that your teacher, was just waxing poetic about all of them? So I said to Katie, I mean, at some point you want to just say, here's a pink article and it's about this. And here's the yellow article, which is about this. The pink one's longer. You'll find the yellow one a little bit shorter and a little more user-friendly. What are you feeling today?
I mean, for me, it's going to be 3. Let's be honest. It's going to be at least 3 in my classroom. But yes, point being, print out the articles, put them on the desk.
And bring it back to your desk.
Yeah,
and now you can attend. And again, we're not talking about wasting paper. Save them. I mean, I started saving things from year to year. I mean, if they're not writing on them, like I'll have those back. Or if you want to annotate them, I don't need them back. But we're doing something wrong. And now we've spent all of this time and we're only on to our 2nd chapter. But we feel so strongly that we've gone too far in one direction in a way that's detrimental to kids.
Yeah, and I think that, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, it's so much more than just curriculum and instruction too. So in the chapter, we highlight 3 thinkers. They're Jenny Odell, who wrote How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy, Cal Newport, who wrote Digital Minimalism, and Johann Hari, who wrote Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again. And I really encourage folks to look at the resources, because the free resources, because we dive into so much more than what I just mentioned about auditing the tech tools you're using. We dive into deeper concerns about, again, surveillance capitalism, the attention economy, helping students come to understand those things, and thinking really intentionally about ways that you can opt to do something different, to operate in a third space, Jenny Odell would call it, while still serving your students and being a part of the community of teachers where you work.
Yeah. And so we don't have to continue answering this question if you want to move on, or we can, kind of just like highlight some of the other few chapters.
We were going to talk about civil conversations next.
Yeah, let's maybe just like a quick view of the rest of the chapters, just kind of topical level. And then maybe for the next question, we can focus on the civil conversations, because I'd love to talk about that.
Okay, so the chapter 3 is on fostering civil classrooms for a more civil society. Chapter 4 is supporting student growth and mastery through teacher leadership, teachers in the classroom as leaders. And the next chapter is really an introspective chapter for teachers, reducing decision fatigue, because teachers are tasked with so many micro decisions in a day. And we called it reducing decision fatigue to increase equity, because we think it increases equity for teachers if they can manage the amount of decisions, and also for students. So we're not giving students different answers because we've managed these decisions. And then the last chapter is called Telling Stories That Lead to Liberation, which is really about the way we think about and talk about students, that we have a more positive framing, because it actually matters. Because when we put negative labels on people, we actually put an artificial ceiling on what they can achieve.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I wish we had like 4 hours for this conversation because I'd love to get into all of these. They're so good. But I'm wondering about, like maybe we take the chapter 3, for example, or we can take like the broader idea of personalized PD and kind of like what your book gives leaders, but however, whichever direction you want to go. But I'm thinking about like the action steps. So like if you're talking to leaders about, what will make this possible in their spaces? What are the actions that this looks like to implement? Or for teachers, what are the actions that this looks like? I know you have so many tangible things at the end of each chapter. I'd love to get into those a little bit. There's so many follow-up questions I'll probably insert here, but I'd love for you to just give me your initial thoughts and then we can take it from there.
Katie, I'm going to start on this one because I feel like I can anchor it to a chapter because I hadn't thought about it in this way, but this is something that I'm doing at work that I feel like answers, what are the brave actions we need to take? And that made me think, if I said, Katie, if I said that our mindset is represented in this book, this really is about telling stories that lead to liberation. And one thing that we're doing at our school is we took all of the student affinity groups, like the Black Student Union, and we have a Muslim Student Association, and I'm not going to list them all, but we actually just decided we need an affinity group. Like these groups, they don't have paid advisors. And we've actually we sat with every single group, the assistant principal did, and I did, and we just said, what are your goals and objectives? How can we support you? And now they're presenting at a faculty meeting. The question is, if you had 8 to 10 minutes with teachers, what do you want them to know? And how can they support you in the classroom and beyond? The Muslim Student Association went to one of our elementary schools and did a lesson about their culture and how and they came with all the students' first names in the class written in Arabic.
Hi, this is Leah popping in to talk about the freebie for today. You can find a free reproducible by our guests chart for recognizing the position of the other. You can find it at the blog post for this episode at www.lindsaybethlyons.com/177. Now back to the show.
And they helped the kids write their names, and they visited, I'm going to say 20 classes, pairs of students. The Hindu Culture Club is doing a Bollywood movie night. These are things that they can't accomplish without adults in the building. And, the assistant principal can't be their advisor. And I'm not in a position, there's no advisory position. But what we can do is listen to them and get it on the school calendar and make sure they have chaperones. So I feel like what's the path to the dream? It's listening to students who have been historically, marginalized, underrepresented, and not heard. And we don't have to give them a voice. They actually have a voice. We just have to create the opportunity and the space for them. And right now, and my job is very busy and multifaceted, that is the most joyful part of my job, sitting around a conference table with students, and they are so grateful. And when I want to say all I'm doing is just saying, yeah, you could do that. Sure, I know who to email. You can email me. And they feel so liberated. And now we're working to connect them with the middle school because also their club enrollment drops off when they graduate. And so now we're working to recruit the 8th graders. So that's something that I can do and our DEI coordinator can do. We partner with the middle school. How can we now get them to interface with the 8th grade? So I feel like that's my path. And I know it says brave action. It actually doesn't feel very brave. It feels just like what we should be doing.
Beth talked about her immediate context, so I guess I'll do the same. I'm not working in a K-12 building right now, which is so weird. Worked in a K-12 building, not only for the over 15 years in my 16th year this year, but then as throughout my college preparatory program. So it's just so weird to not be in the rhythms of the building. But because I'm not, it feels kind of futile for me to list things I did when I was. Those feel like past actions.
Well,
right now.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say one thing that I think sort of encompasses, and again, it would never be a waste of time to listen to all of the things that Katie did because it's kind of amazing. But I also think that one of the challenges that we all go through is that we have a broken system and we need to fix it while it's still operating. And so it's this moving target. So, but sorry, Katie, I didn't mean to.
No, that's okay. No, so like the piece of the puzzle I'm working with now is in my student teaching supervision role. And what I'm finding is that's a little shift for me is that I'm learning to serve students and work alongside students who may already have privilege and power in ways that maybe the communities that I worked alongside before did not. And that is its own challenge. So I've been reading and rereading this Carla Shalaby essay, You Must Accept Them and You Must Accept Them with Love. You must accept them and accept them with love, which is a James Baldwin quote. And she talks exactly about this specific thing. And it's been very supportive to me in thinking about how do I help pre-service teachers enter the profession ready to cultivate excellence in their work, provide culturally and developmentally responsive and equitable classrooms for their students, do so in a way which honors like what they desire for themselves and the vision that they have for themselves, not just the vision I have for them. Right. So it's a lot. It's sort of supporting them in their pre-service work to anticipate where do they need more support? What resources do they need? How can I model teaching that's sort of rooted in a love of all students? And again, while helping them be the teacher they want to be and not the teacher I want them to be. Because now, like, we're back in a power relationship I don't want, if that's what I'm doing, is just trying to get them to become me, essentially. And Beth and I have talked about this a lot with, in our experiences in general in education. To be a leader is not you can't be a leader by just wanting people to follow the same path that you took and wanting them to do it the same way you did it. That's not leading. That's not responsive at all. So this is a new challenge for me. And the brave action is sort of, I'm not sure what part of it feels, I guess the bravest part of it is just in me admitting that it's hard for me to work in a situation where I'm serving students who have privilege and power, and to do that in a way that's rooted in love and not sort of get resentful or get annoyed at things that they may privileges they may have that even as myself as a pre-service teacher and as a young teacher I didn't have, but just to serve them genuinely.
I love that. I also wanted to share, if it's okay with you all, things that I was reflecting on from what you shared that just were brave actions that I think would be super cool, or like action steps, perhaps you could say, to consider. So things that I talk about, but were just novel to me in the thought process. So these are kind of my ahas for the book, particularly around that chapter on civil discussions. So one, I love that you distinguish between norms and baseline assumptions. Mind blowing. I was just like, this is incredible. And I'll mute myself actually after that one, just because I want to know, do you guys want to just kind of explain that a little bit?
Sure. So I want to shout out my friend and Beth's friend and both of our colleagues. One of my best friends, Justin Dolcimascolo Garrett, and we worked together to sort of develop this concept of baseline assumptions. We didn't develop it in a vacuum, and we have lots of resources in the book for folks to look at to start to understand that. But it came from, I guess what it came from was this realization that lots of people were norming with their classes, but there was still something missing. Like the norms were dictating the what was happening in the class. Like we're trying to dictate the actions in the classroom, but there was never like a baseline discussion of, here are the things, here are the assumptions that are going to guide the discussions. Here's how we'll have the conversation is great, but there needs to be some guardrails around what we're talking about and whether what we're agreeing to are the conditions of our understanding of society before we can actually get into the how we're going to have the conversation and respecting other people through the way I show up in my conversation, and am careful of my conversational quirks and things like that. And we really did feel like that piece was missing. And I think that a lot of times folks are worried and scared to say to their students, in this classroom, we are going to operate on the assumption that, but it's our belief that we have the intellectual freedom to do so. So, for me, one of the ways this manifested as a teacher of English is I would say to my students, in this classroom, we're not going to debate whether people who are gay should be able to get married. They should. And you don't have to agree with that personally, but in this classroom, you have to respect that view. And, that's teaching is not apolitical. We know this. So it is just, I'm glad that you brought it up as a brave action because it is. Does it mean that some people might disagree with you? Sure. But and that doesn't mean that every baseline assumption has to be what I just said. They're both things that you as the teacher bring to the conversation, and they're things that you and your students decide upon together. So it might be something as simple as all people deserve access. Also, all people deserve access to water, to healthy water, and something like that. So Beth, do you want to add it all?
I do. I want to just say a braver action of Katie and Justin with baseline assumptions is when they did let's call it professional learning with teachers, because they did like lunch and learns. These baseline assumptions were really important because they did devolve into things that were not really up for debate. And they could click back a few slides and say like, oh, that's not part of the conversation, because we sort of established that everyone can have clean water. And that's brave to do with colleagues, but I feel like it gave them the language because they thought about it before. So I'm going to say that's a brave action to do it with your colleagues. So it's sort of, then it's neutral. It's not judgmental. It's not like you said something wrong. It's like, ooh, right. Also remember, we're not debating that or discussing that.
And what it kind of does is it gives people an opportunity. And I think that people initially meet this with fear for many reasons, backlash. But another reason is they don't want to tell a student what to think about something. One of the things we talk about in the civil conversations chapter is sometimes what you're actually doing with a baseline assumption is giving a child an opportunity to try on an identity that they're not going to get to try on anywhere else in their life. And that can be really... you can say to them, you don't have to think this in your own life. You have to respect it in here, though, that this is a guardrail in our conversation in here. And it really does. It gives them the opportunity to see what that would feel like. And then they can let it go as soon as they leave if they want, if that's what their families want, if that's how things go for them. But at least in that moment, it gives them that chance, which they might not otherwise have.
Another thing that Katie says about civil conversations that I also really like is that in school, it's like, let's have a debate. You're going to have, one class period to research this issue. And then your job is to just debate the other side. And, the more we've been thinking, and we have enough of that going on in society. So we're just like, we need more conversation. So Katie and I have been using the terms like inquiry and conversation. We're going to look at both these issues. And we cite work from Frances Kissling in the chapter, like, what is good in the position of the other, and Katie used the example of, gay marriage. Like I use the example of like, everyone should be able to buy a cake from a bakery for their wedding. Like, and let's talk, we're not going to debate it, whether you think they should or they shouldn't. And also like, where are the people coming from who didn't want to sell the gay couple the cake? And we talked about religion and what could you admire about them as being religious and trying to adhere to their faith. So just looking at it as a complex issue instead of like, I think they shouldn't get the cake. Well, I think they should get a cake. And I think that we have enough polarity that we don't need to nurture that in our classroom at all, and that it's okay.
Yes. Oh my gosh. There's so many things that I want to jump in on. You guys are brilliant. So one thing I wanted to say is that, yes, around that, like the Adrienne Maree Brown quote that you used about being wrong. Oh my gosh. So good. Right. And just the idea of being wrong, right? Like that we learn a lot and grow a lot from being wrong. Like the goal that you shared about mutual understanding, I was imagining like, if instead of the rhetoric outcome, right, or the make a claim, defend it outcome that we typically, I use that as a teacher. I literally was coaching people this month to use that as a teacher. And now I'm like, what if it was instead mutual understanding that was the outcome, like literally as a priority standard on a rubric? How cool would that be, right? And you guys have a ton of like page 96, page 107. There's a bunch of prompts that you guys share about like, here are the question prompts that you could hand to a student when they see an argument or an opinion about something, and you could unpack it, right? And you could, to your point, Beth, like, what is valuable about this argument, right? Like, what is the underlying value? I think there's so much in that. I talk about using like the positive psychology's values and actions. And I think you guys actually cited them as well. as kind of a culture builder. But how cool would it be if we actually integrated it into academic conversations as well, right? Where are the values in this? I also loved that, I think related to what you were just talking about, this idea of asking students to just think about what they think about, as opposed to what's your opinion on this, go. And that just made me think about, how do we create, you also write about flow states, which I love Chicks Mahai's work, and like thinking about, carving out time free from distractions. That's what enables us to be creative. That's what enables us to like have the time to consider what we think and how, all the different things I think they merge together around this question for me is like, what does the class look like? Or what could it look like when it enables us? I know that's a big question. I just want to know if you have thoughts on that.
Did you say class?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think one very concrete thing is, when we think about planning for rhetoric, when we think about planning for, thinking through being persuasive in our writing, so often those units rush to picking a position to defend. And I think that, excuse me, an essential piece that often our units are missing is like a whole lot of time for students to just learn about the issue. They have knee-jerk positions, sure. I mean, for many things, not for everything, but for many things. But before even asking them what their position is, like, what is a topic you're interested in? I don't even want to know what you think about it yet, because I don't even think you fully know what you think about it yet. And that's not your fault. You wouldn't have, you haven't had the time to figure that out. So like, let's spend some time just building our knowledge around this issue before you decide what your position's going to be on that, to the degree that that's possible. I know that, there's some argument that our positions are sort of going to create our arguments. Our positions are already set. We're not necessarily going to be swayed by information. But I do think that while that may be true of adults, we have an opportunity with students to take some time to build background knowledge before having them jump into defending, one position or another, and using rhetoric toward that end.
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing that I'm thinking years ago, before I had the language for it, I did a 4 corners activity, and I had told every student, like, go to the corner that you believe in. And if you end up in the corner by yourself, I will come and stand with you. And one student, I don't want to say what it was, but he went to a very unpopular corner, something that you did not agree with. And I went and I stood next to him. And I just said, tell me why you think that, like, share with everyone. But just, it gave him a chance to like interrogate that knee-jerk decision I didn't criticize him. I stood next to him. And I think there's something that now when I have language for it, I would think it's that cancel culture. But instead, I was like calling him in, like, here are some reasons I think it's problematic. Where were you coming from when you stood here? But I mean, it changed the whole feeling of the class that I went and stood next to him. And again, when you talk about brave action, but it felt pretty brave to go stand there with that opinion that he decided he strongly agreed with.
Thank you both for those concrete examples. I think I'm looking at the time. I totally lost track of time because I've been so engaged in this conversation. Maybe we could do a lightning round for the next couple of questions. One, I'm wondering what the biggest challenge that you faced or that you anticipate facing as you continue this work is, and feel free to both answer.
I mean, I think the biggest challenge would be that people have really set mindsets about what's right and wrong and what's good for themselves and what's good for children. So I think that is a big challenge. And how do you partner with people that you don't necessarily agree with?
Agree.
Yeah, so good. And everyone should get the book to read more about how to partner with people to do that. One thing that you would encourage listeners to do when they end the episode, what's kind of that first next step?
I think that everything feels so big, but if you could do one thing, one small change, if you decide you're going to rethink your debate, right? Rethink your debate. Just like it's choose one chapter, choose one issue, choose one thing, because small changes have a big impact.
Something you're learning about lately. This does not have to relate to your profession or this conversation. It can be literally anything.
Well, I'm gonna say something first, and I feel like Katie's gonna have some kind of beautiful wrap up. I think what I'm continuing to learn is that we can't change everything we want to, but what we can always do is we can show up for people. We can show up for what we feel is right. And maybe not always, but sometimes that's enough.
I just finished Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Water Dancer, which was published a long time ago now, but I don't always get to books the year that they're published. And it was without a doubt the best book I've read this year. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, besides short form pieces, I'm only reading fiction right now in my life. My brain with a 1-year-old cannot handle weighty nonfiction. So I'm reading The Water Dancer, or I just finished it. And there's this beautiful passage in there about abolitionist Corinne Quinn is the name of the character. And the narrator says about her that she loved the idea of abolition. She loved the idea she loved the idea that she was advocating for abolition and that other white people were not. Like, she loved being ethically better, conceiving of herself as ethically better than them. But she did not love enslaved people. And ever since I read that, it was just so beautifully put. I did it zero justice. Everything Ta-Nehisi Coates touches turns to gold. And I hope he writes more fiction soon. But it's really had me reflecting on, like, what are the times in my life when I was solely operating, or not solely, because I don't think I was ever solely, but I was at least in part operating out of ego when I was advocating for against injustices. And then, like, what are the times in my life when it has been only pure and genuine love for students? And then how can I reflect on those times and what I was doing and how I was feeling to make sure that it only ever falls on the side of doing it because I love students and I want them to have full access to their civil rights education all the time, and never fall on the side of I'm doing this because it makes me feel better than other people, or it makes me feel like a purpose for my life, because it's not about me, it's not about us, it's about the work of it's about the freedom dreaming, right? That's what it's about. So I love that he's had my head there in this kind of time when I'm in education, but not sort of in the school building right now. It just feels like the right time. There's no wrong time to be reflecting on that, but this feels like a particularly right time.
That was so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, guys. So the last question I'm going to ask is just, where do people learn more about you, connect with you, get your book, all the things?
Well, I have a website, and it's bethpandolpho.com. And that's just kind of like a landing page for all of my things. And my email's on there, and it's connect@bethpandolpho.com. And I'm more active on LinkedIn than I am on what is now X. Katie?
Yeah, so folks can just reach me via email it's just katecubano@gmail.com, Kate, and then Cuban with an O @gmail.com. And I'm not super active on X, and I don't have a LinkedIn. I'm just not doing it right now.
And our book is on Amazon and on Barnes and Noble.
Our book is on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Also, though, I would love to share. We would love to share with you, Lindsay, the link to the book website on Solution Tree, so that folks can access those materials that we mentioned.
Brilliant. We'll put it in the blog post for this episode in the show notes. Awesome. Thank you guys so much, Katie and Beth. This is out. If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan, from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no-strings-attached brainstorm call at lindsaybethlyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.